Hey folks, welcome to Instructional Designers in Offices Drinking Coffee or other hot beverages of their choice. As always, this episode is brought to you by the team here at Domino, empowering L&D teams to develop, manage, and deliver impactful learning content at scale. Check us out at domino.com, and there's a K in there if you haven't figured it out. In fact, the whole back end of it is kind of fancy, isn't it, on that Domino part? So yeah, think about it. Knowledge, no. And hey gang, Connie Malamud is with us again. Connie, in case folks didn't catch one of your other previous appearances, or they haven't seen you or met you at any of the conferences, etc., just tell our folks a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Been in the field forever, maybe since it started, I'm not sure. I write the eLearning Coach blog and podcast, and I have a community of instructional designers called Mastering Instructional Design. Did a lot of work with a lot of client work throughout my life, and was even a bad manager at one point. Got out of that. And that's about it. Really into visual design. That's important.
Very
And
cool.
writing.
Mm-hmm. And writing, that half of your repertoire is why we're here today, because we're digging into strategies and things that you've found in working with AI for doing various writing tasks in our space. Tell us, when did you start exploring AI for that kind of process? How long have you been doing it? Where did you start?
I was just using AI for simple things like clarifying or a complex sentence that I could tell it wasn't right but couldn't get it right, or mostly just using Grammarly for proofreading and getting my those damn punctuation and grammar things that you still get wrong. But for this event and also for future writing, I was pretty interested in what the cognitive activities are of writing, because I've never really delved into that. And then where AI can give us support, and where I think we better use, well, we always need to use caution. Everyone knows all that. But where we need some true discernment.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we should then, you mentioned the cognitive activities for writing. Maybe we should start there, because I think that sounds like that kind of gives us a framework for what you've been exploring.
Yeah, it is a good framework. It came from two professors, I presume, and researchers in 1981, Linda Flower and John Hayes. And they wrote some papers showing the cognitive activities of writing, and people still seem to refer to it. I don't know if it's been updated. I tried to find that out, and I haven't seen an update, but maybe there is one. Maybe one of them will come on my podcast. I loved. Should I share my screen?
Yeah. Let's go that route.
Okay, and
sometimes those ideas are just solid.
And we can go off and on. Okay,
Yeah.
I just want everyone to see my nice little cup of. By the way, I wanted to ask you guys, does the first part of that, is it supposed to sound like idiot?
We think of that as a wonderful coincidence.
A humbling.
Yes, exactly.
Well, one of the first things is kind of interesting, because we tend to think of the writing process as planning and then writing and then re-examining it to rewrite it. But they discovered using Think Aloud and other types of protocols that it's really a very recursive activity. And when you stop and think about it, of course it is. You're always going back and forth and replanning. And so I just thought that was realistic. And here's a quote from them. It's best understood as a set of distinctive thinking processors, which writers orchestrate or organize during the act of composing.
So the bad pun part of my brain needs to ask, writing is a recursive activity, but if you're not writing in cursive, could it also be a reprint activity?
Retype.
Yeah, retyping. Anyway.
No, I
So-
think cognitively we have to go with recursive.
Okay.
I think so too. It makes me think of when I was writing a lot more and a lot longer back in those education and doctorate days and stuff. And yeah, it was definitely a process going through that and just reflecting on that now. There's definitely different steps that I went through, at least to make it good.
Right,
It was
right. And then
very
you go back and
nonsensical to except to maybe me in the very first draft.
well, I often write articles that use research, and I'm always going back and forth. And, some people say the hardest part about writing is knowing what you want to say. And that's why we go back and forth a lot. But anyway, this is their model. And the part that I mean, it's all important, and I don't want to get into all of it, it's too much. But the part that I thought that would work for this conversation is the actual writing process. And so here's the way they describe it. The planning process is forming an internal representation. So you're not using language yet. And I just think that's pretty fascinating. It's kind of thought without language, if that's possible. I mean, I know it is possible, but I don't know if you'd use the word thought. Translating, and I got thrown by this word because of the common meaning of translating. It's transforming abstract thoughts into the linear syntax of writing. The third phase is evaluating and improving it. And then there's a monitor that determines when to move from one process to another. So the monitor is overseeing it all or underlying it all. And that's when we go back and forth. And I tried to find out if the monitor is the same as metacognition. And it didn't seem like it was, but I couldn't quite understand why. But anyway, what do you think about this approach?
Yeah, I was thinking when I was looking at it, it did remind me of my own internal process. And never, well, I talked about this with some people there. I mean, that first stage, putting that down and forming those thoughts and thinking about it, I would end up maybe that's where people jot down outlines or pieces or concepts or phrases in there, and then translating it. That how do I articulate this? How do I go ahead and explain it in a way, and then reviewing it, of course, and looking at it and going, yeah, that doesn't quite make sense. It makes sense to me, but how can I make that flow and fully communicate? And even jumping back on some of these too, when
Right.
phase wasn't fully thought out. I like it. Like I said, they're very much in tune of that phase. I used to say, I can't write something once. I have to write it 3 times, because if I make it through the third time, it's not very good.
Mhm. Do we have anyone in chat saying anything about it?
Nothing so far,
Okay.
but we'll see. We'll keep our eyes over there. Lots of comments about dancing, though.
Hey, and I'm all for the Go Nuggets. So Denver Nuggets is the basketball team for those who don't know. So
okay. So anyway, there are 3 sub-processes that they've found in planning: generating ideas, retrieving that relevant information from long-term memory, and the kind of writing I do. And this was, I think, pretty college student oriented, or perhaps, I'm not sure. I'm also going to generate ideas from research, and a lot of you are too, organizing and structuring the ideas, and setting goals and sub-goals. So under translating, they don't really call these sub-processes. There are things that go on during translating: managing simultaneous constraints, using automaticity. And if people aren't familiar with that term, that's when you are so familiar with how to write in your language that you pretty much know the grammar, the syntax, the punctuation, all of that. So all of that comes automatically, which frees up working memory. You don't have to hold that in working memory, whereas like a someone who's writing in another language or a younger student won't have automaticity.
Mm-hmm.
And then transforming and reorganizing knowledge. So that's what we're doing during translating. And during reviewing, we're judging the quality of the text or our plans against the established goals, modifying the text by evaluating it. Oops. And that was it. So that just helps to give a further explanation. So now we get into the part of where can AI support. So I'd like to ask you, what do you think, or anyone else listening, do you think have you found AI to be able to support any of these sub-processes?
Well, when you talk about the sub processes, first, they rang very true for me. And I'm thinking even like the automaticity and thinking back to periods in your life when you were learning more vocabulary or improving your writing skills, and some of that automaticity in some level wasn't there. So it slowed some of that down of that process and bringing that in. And when it was there, that was like, ooh, you're just that stuff there and getting your thoughts down. Maybe not so clear, but you get to the next phase, especially when you feed something longer into AI. You can see, I think there's a mode where you can actually see it all in a lot of cases where it's showing its quote unquote thinking. Obviously, it's not really thinking, but the steps it's going through and thinking back to some of those things, you can kind of see it's looking at Reddit, it's looking at those, generating ideas, getting some different information because it doesn't really generate ideas. And then it's talking about, we were talking earlier in the green room just about how sometimes it is a little verbose and talking about how it thought through and why it is these pieces and everything else. And that's kind of, to me, I was thinking maybe that's a little bit like the organizing and structuring of that. Because certainly from my perspective, when I've used that writing, I've looked at some of that stuff and I go, wow, that was great, but you really missed the point. And let's go ahead and fix this. And I ignore the fact that it spit out a final piece or whatever, a draft as it calls it.
Mm-hmm. It strikes me that, in working with the AI, you kind of need to put the goal setting at the top of the planning process too, right? Because you have to be able to provide it with, what you want. So it potentially kind of flips these orders or shifts the order.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, I think that's a really good point. By the way, there was a LinkedIn conversation and Corinne Pagano said she loved the word discernment even more than judgment, which they're kind of synonymous, but kind of not. And, or it has a little bit of a different connotation. So I got that from her. Okay. So
I was thinking just to that, depending on what you're doing, that goal at the beginning makes a lot of sense, but sometimes it steers you in a way that you shouldn't. And I'm thinking back to cases where you're still exploring, you don't really have a clear of what the end goal is yet. You're learning, that this is the direction you're going. I'm thinking for bigger pieces of writing, perhaps than a short article or something. Sometimes it's just like the preconceived notion steers you, and you will get into the whatever endpoint that you want if you start out that way. So,
well, I think that's a good use case too. So depending on your use case, you would put that at the top or not, if you just want to explore ideas. So this is what I've found. And there's probably other things if anybody wants to add more.
Yeah, somebody in the chat was talking about the idea generation, translation, technical things they're less familiar with, subjects. I mean, we're talking to a colleague, and this was, I guess we can say the early days of AI, because that goes like 2 years ago. But how he was using that a lot, really in this planning phase, to help him understand the material a bit better, kind of get some outlines and structure. So when he went to speak with the SME, who already knows the material very well, could keep that discussion a little more focused, validating and not go into the proverbial, SME situations like they need to know everything. Clunk, 18 volumes landed on your desk. And he described that as making that whole process and working with, obviously their time constraint, extremely helpful. Because again, like the person in the chat there commented, not familiar with the concepts, at least not strongly. So
Yeah, that's really true. By the way, LTM is long-term memory. So I've seen AI be able to support long-term memory and working memory or short-term memory. I
and
think
how
we,
so?
go ahead.
So when you said AI supporting long-term memory, I got some ideas myself, but I'm curious as to what you found or how you tie that in.
Well, in this case, it's just retrieving facts. For me, it's often from research, and then I always have to go back and check that it's really there, that it's not a hallucination. And I do have some research tools that I really like. I wonder if you remind me, I'll put them in chat afterwards, because they do a much better job than your standard LLMs, I think.
Mm.
So then structuring the ideas, have you ever used it for that? I certainly have.
Yeah, I have too, especially those. I think the default for people in general is let's get it done and fast, and so you just do it all. Oh, that looks great, and don't check the things, because I mean, if one thing's a lot of the writing does looks pretty good, but I find generating those structured outlines, breaking into that step, helps you to kind of review that. I think it's really two areas. One is validating that, it's on the right track, but at least when I'm being good, it's forcing me to think about it and going, hey, am I missing something? And me actually collaborating with the AI, as opposed to just leaning on the AI and letting it do all the heavy lifting and light lifting.
Well, Ronnie in the chat has echoed that as well, Paul. I find that I gravitate to AI to write something for me to start with, and then I read through it and critique it and give it different prompts to revise it. And by doing so, I find myself understanding the material better, because I am critiquing and figuring out as I'm doing so what I'm really looking for. But Ronnie does have some parentheses in there. This is a very tedious process, though. And I'm looking forward to hearing about other programs to use. So
I agree. It's very tedious, and sometimes I try not to use it for writing, but even the amount that you have to go through to see if you agree, it's more like, I think, a catalyst. Like, it might get you going, but it's not the final word. And and that's why discernment is there, like for every single thing that AI can do. You really have to go through. It doesn't know your audience. I mean, you can give it the audience, but you have a certain amount of what it doesn't have is experience and feelings. And so what we have to go through it all. And I guess, what Ronnie's saying, it does really kind of get you to know it, because you're in this interactive chat with it.
And I was thinking back to your structure that you provided earlier about how people were doing it. Obviously, Delta 80 AI wasn't on the mind there, but
Right.
I'm thinking back to writing as like, maybe and maybe you're going to talk about that. Maybe that's a very good structure for how to effectively work with AI in writing, and not have a lot of the things that Ronnie talked about, to where it becomes useful but very tedious to have to go through and get it to work and be a time saver, actually, instead of a time sink. Although
Right.
if it makes it better and it's about the same time, that's still an advantage. So
I think that's a good point. I've never given it a writing prompt, and this one I asked AI because I didn't have experience with it. And I said, how can it help with goal setting? And this was the answer. I mean,
Yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just thinking, I've definitely had differences in tone. I don't know that I've evaluated, is the substance that much different there? When I say, hey, my audience is this, or this is a imperative from down high, so to speak, that has this type of messaging, and it does change it up. But I'll be honest, I have not kind of gone through, other than obviously noticing tone differences and a little more emphasis on some areas that it substantially changed what it was talking about. And I guess that gets back probably to the very first phase in there too. So
Mm-hmm. Let's look at translating. This one, that's a caution sign. I've never done that, and I worry about agency, about human agency and skills. Writing skills are so important. So personally, I've never done this.
yeah, that's I remember a conversation with a couple of my friends that were visiting. Both of them are professors. One of them teaches English to German students. Another one is in English and writing and stuff too. And they shared their, of course, some of it's how much are we getting older, and that cranky person we never thought as a young, always down on the downers and everything else. But that so many people were turning in things that were clearly written by AI, and maybe it's harder to be clearly, but that they obviously, when asked about their writing, they had very little understanding of what they wrote, and they were 100% outsourcing, translating that as abstract thoughts into linear syntax. And yeah, that agency, it's something I worry about too, even as myself. Am I being too lazy and not putting in the thought to think about this? And I mean, all skills, I mean, writing's no exception. If you're anybody who's written a lot and then stopped for a while and then went back, and it's just like, yeah, it's hard to get back into. You don't fall off the bicycle, but you don't get back on quite as fast. Or I suppose an apt analogy, since we said breathing in Denver, is you don't go up that mountain on the bicycle after you haven't been on it for a month. You just can't get there.
I think what's important here is that, again, that discernment aspect of things, right? If we're working on content that's going to be used in training context, etc., there's our discernment, but there's also going to have to be the filter of the discernment of others, such as the SMEs, etc., to make sure that things are accurate or not causing risk, etc., on that process. So discernment's kind of a multi-layered or a multi-step potentially aspect of what we would be doing with this tool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy with the spelling and grammar checks that I can do. And even though I do know a lot of it, I always find, if I'm writing a very long article or something, that I will have things wrong.
Yeah, I love this stuff too. Obviously, we had some of this before AI, and that certainly helped out. But I have to say, and maybe this is that old fuddy-duddy writer in me, is with all the content you read online, and of course they're trying to get it out. We need to get it out more and more, faster, faster, faster. Yes, everything is spelled right, but they're the wrong words. It's very clearly anybody who actually spent a moment proofing that and had the knowledge would have caught that was the wrong where or the wrong bear or whatever the word is in some of that. And it's disturbing a little bit when it looks like it's not being used as a tool. It's being used as it knows better than me on all cases. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe we should talk about the fingerprints of AI.
Yeah, I'm curious. You mentioned there some of the fingerprints of AI and how, I mean, my most obvious one, which, yes, they use it right, but I'm like, I've never seen more M dashes in my life until the last 2 years. So, well, what are some fingerprints you've noticed?
Well, that one depresses me because I love M dashes.
I was just going to say, I've long been an M dash user. It might be a reflection of my English degree, but it's actually been kind of fun watching some of the conversations about M dashes that I've seen in social feeds, because I've probably overused them in the past.
Well, and I remember reading your stuff, Chris, back in the day when I reviewed some of your instructional design and building. And yeah, there were M dashes now that I think about it, but there were not as many M dashes in it that I see out of an AI. It'd be like Chris copied and pasted a sentence over and over again or something with some different words.
One of the main ones that I really don't like is the sentence structure of it's not X, it's Y. I've never seen that sentence structure so often as I do now. So do you know what I mean? It's like instructional design isn't okay. How about this one? E-learning isn't turning pages. E-learning is an interactive experience. That kind of thing. It isn't this, but it is this. I see it everywhere now, and that's one of the signs for me. Now, maybe some people write like that, but I never noticed that structure very
well, and it's the kind of rhetorical device that you might use like once, right, in something, but to have it, if it's being repeated, then your eye starts to catch it and kind of gets into your brain a bit.
A lot of times it isn't necessary. Writing isn't linear, it's recursive. I don't know. It just doesn't seem, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like when you read something very well written that's meaty and covers a lot. And I think when I see a lot of the AI, and maybe that's appropriate for your headline grabbers and online news, is that it reminds me a lot of those articles where you read it and 5 minutes later, 1 minute later, you realized you learned nothing. It was just recursively talking about a variation. It had words. It sounded good. It was like ice cream, maybe, but you didn't get anything out of it.
Well, I'd like to argue with that. I think you get some protein from ice cream. Anyway,
you get joy out of ice cream.
You get joy out of it. Bad analogy.
Yeah. I read something last night that came up in my socials, and as I was reading it, there were some really interesting words being used, and yet I did not feel that they actually aligned maybe with the nature of the person who had written it. And if that was the case, they would have been the most frustrating conversation to actually have with a person. And it didn't happen just once. It was several places where the word with all the extra syllables was used instead of the shorter word. And then also then emotionally, and the topic was a pretty potentially emotional thing. And yet the whole tone of it as I came out of it was very superficial. And as I was working through it, it's in a well-known publication. But what struck me was, I'm like, this sounds like the person really, really did rely heavily on AI. And it also feels like in the model of the publication that that it ran in, that maybe the editing team should have gotten involved. It felt kind of like it was an opinion piece, but yeah, it had some flags on it for me. It caused me to sort of doubt the veracity of the experience that was supposed to be being expressed, something that should have been, I'm going to say, would fall into the category of a heartfelt or, that kind of expression. And it just kind of sort of sat there, didn't have that resonance after all.
I think it's a good point that editing teams in publications really need to watch the AI speak. A lot of it's just great sounding words and no meaning. And I was watching a travel video about Portugal on YouTube, and it didn't take long to figure out that the words were AI, that the script was AI. The images, I could tell, were like 7 or 8 seconds each one. I mean, the video segments were exactly what the latest video can.
AI video creation does, yep.
They were beautiful. They were zooming in, total drone imagery. And then the voice was AI. And I stopped it to click, and it said something like, it used a term, not AI, like it was synthesized or synthetic, some unusual term. But then it became a comedy. And, I was watching with my husband, and we just started laughing at the meaningless statements it was making. It just meant nothing. It was so funny. And nobody went through that and edited it. It had lots of views too. It was on YouTube.
Well, and that gets me back to, you used the word earlier in our conversation, discernment. And, as a population, are we being critical about some of these things? Or are we just going, oh, that's nice fluff, and it did cause me to think because there was nothing to think about. So, I viewed it there, but a little bit different direction. But you had mentioned some other LLMs or tools that
Oh, yeah.
using, and I know folks out there are, of course, used to ChatGPT. I like Claude a little bit better, or any of the different ones out there. But beyond the kind of the big three, big four, what are some of the types of tools, and what have you liked about it? Because I'm thinking to this writing process, some tools, big surprise, might be really good for certain steps,
Right.
and be heads and tails above that as you break down the process of how you use an AI. In other words, everything's not a hammer.
Okay. Well, first I should say that the AI research tools will show you research that, unless you're working at a university or have those databases, you cannot access. So, so it uses, if you want the full text, it's going to use a lot of the open resources, which it seems like they keep getting better and better, that more organizations are allowing individuals to download. But one is Consensus. I was going to put it in AI. Do I have access to the chat? I was going to put it in chat.
Yeah,
Doesn't
throw it
seem-
in our private chat there, and our team will go ahead and throw it up into LinkedIn
Okay,
there.
got it. So Consensus is one. Elicit is another. And people have different opinions about, which ones are great. But these are all ones that I've been able to use for free. Undermined. I think it's either Elicit or Undermined that makes you clarify your research question, which is kind of fun. It makes you get it really.
You need to have a hypothesis, almost.
What's that?
You need to almost have a hypothesis.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I've heard of Research Rabbit. I can't remember if that has a free version. I'm not saying they're free forever, but those are three that I use, and I'm pretty happy, some of the times with the results. I've also found some workaround. You can't always email a professor or a researcher and ask for their work if you don't need it right away. Sometimes I get something like 6 months later. Oh, yeah, okay, I'll send it. And you can find often the pre-publication version or another version.
Mhm.
You don't know if the research was corrected from pre-pub or not. There's some general idea you can. Sometimes it's hard to tell from the abstract, and I certainly don't trust. I think it's in Notebook LM. It will show you where it gets the idea from. You know how AI can just make up, summaries.
Make up a reference that doesn't exist, or a reference that doesn't actually have the data that it says it does.
Absolutely. The ones that it makes up, the other day I said, well, why did you make that up? And it said, well, you wanted things after 2015, and I didn't have them. It's like a little kid or something.
Elicit, is it Elicit, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, illicit or illicit.
Yeah.
That gets you something else if you try to search.
I'm thinking Elicit's a better brand name than illicit. Illicit research. Well, that's a different conversation, probably.
I'm sure there are other ones. Those are the 3 or 4 that I've used. I haven't used Research Rabbit.
And those types of tools, I haven't used them. I know I've talked with you about in the past using them, but share with our audience there, what are some of what do they do for you? Why do you go to them? What do they kind of produce? What can someone expect out of that? What can you not expect out of it? Because that's not what its forte is, or?
It's not, I guess it's not an LLM,
Mhm.
but maybe it is too, because you can ask questions about the research. So maybe it is also. But on top of that, it's purely academic. If you ask the question, what does the research say? What is evidence that there are cognitive activities about the writing process, or something like that? It will give you some true research responses. And so that's very different than what ChatGPT or Gemini will give you. They'll give you Forbes articles and things like that.
This reminds me of that first step you talk about in there, and researching and identifying the topics there, and also something that here at Domino, we've had a lot of internal discussions as we start to flow out things and model our own AI agents, and the importance of, governed content. So like in this one, it sounds like, I mean, it's using an LM because it's summarizing, looking, all that, but the source content is all from approved sources. It's not anything and everything out there, which is, as we know, lots of opinions and lots of things not very well grounded in research or academic studies. It reminds me of another one, completely different area, but same idea. And I forget the name of the tool, maybe somebody in the chat knows it there, but there's another AI tool to help you with research about health stuff. Especially you're looking at nutrition and other things there, and it's governed. It's based on peer-reviewed research out there, and you get I'm curious, Connie, have you actually done some research with the typical ones just for fun, maybe, and then actually use this, and what kind of differences that you get? I'm sure it's dramatic.
It's very different. It's very different. However, let me just say this: you still need to use discernment, because not all research is great. So some of the research could be poor. And so you really have to go through it and decide, does this sound reasonable? If they say they found all this stuff up and they found the cognitive activities and they tested it on 3 people, obviously. That's, but there are whole levels.
And those 3 people were Larry, Mo, and Curly. So
love them.
But I think with this one, most likely it actually links to those research. And when you click on the link, it actually goes to the real research that provided. Is that accurate, or is that just more accurate?
No, that is accurate. It will go to the research if it's open, if it's an open research. So you can download the PDF and read it. On the other hand, it will give you abstracts that you may not have access to unless you have access to a university library, which I used to have, and I just gave up because I stopped working with that wonderful client who gave me access. And that hurts. And and also I think a lot, I don't know academia that well, but I'm guessing that a lot of people are publishing. I don't know. You just really need to check it. Check the research.
Well, that is, and I remember from my academia days, there are journals and there are journals.
Right.
And some of them are more like, think of a rag that it would have never existed in print that's online now. And there's some journals like that. I mean, you can find a place to get it published, but you would rather have it published at Random House or so think of whatever. And there's less critical reviews of some of that. I even thought about abstracts, and that's been some of the nice but frustrating, because I've had links that it came to the abstract, and abstract tells you the guts of it there, but there's pieces there that you can't really evaluate that. I mean, the N of 3 usually shows up, but there's other things that until you read the details on it, you can't. I mean, the conclusion's there, but you can kind of see the thread, but you can't see the full thread of to why that was in there.
It's pretty iffy. Yeah. Just going on an abstract alone, I wouldn't recommend.
Yeah. Ronnie has a question. I'm going to sort of paraphrase it because I think anyway, she's asking, about other tools, because these are tools that we've been talking about here about helping, at the research stage. You've mentioned a couple of times Notebook LM. So tell us a little bit about using that, because that's, it's not in the same name recognition category as some of the other tools that.
No. Well, Notebook LM is Google's way for you to learn. You can give it research papers, and it will make infographics that are kind of complex, a little bit hard to look at. Although you can say simplify, that helps. It will give you quizzes, flashcards, audio, like a podcast. So a couple years ago when it first came out, or maybe a year ago, I created a podcast, 2 podcast sessions from Notebook LM. One, I uploaded a chapter from one of my books. And this was about a year ago, so it's probably improved, or 2 years ago. And it got a lot of nuance incorrect in And the podcast is having two people having a conversation. It's kind of amazing. And then I also sent it to a page with just a medical, like something from the Mayo Clinic, and it got that pretty perfect. So it wasn't great with nuance back then. But another thing is it can summarize. I think that's the tool that I saw it, a summary, and then you can click on the findings and it'll highlight the area within the document that we're finding from, and that really helps.
Nice.
I've heard of other people liking it too. Does it help kind of micro? So in terms of like the research, it's focused on what you're putting into it and helping summarize that, and as opposed to gathering all potentially good, but potentially very spurious information from the web, or how does that all work?
Well, if you upload something as a source, you can say, give me a report or summarize, and you can select that source. So you can choose the sources that you want to use. You can choose 10 or, 1. So that's helpful. It took me, I kept trying to get it to replicate that drawing of Flower and Hayes cognitive processing model. It had a decent graphic, which I just screen captured. Hopefully they don't mind, from 1981. But it couldn't really replicate it. It kept changing it around. So I just wanted something a little bit cleaner, and I didn't have time to make it.
Yeah.
Well, I will mention a shameless plug. We do have a webinar coming up about graphic design and creating graphics in the way you want. So
good. That
different
sounds good.
there. So maybe sign up for that one. I was also seeing Susan commenting in there about adding in things in her cases, resume, job description stuff, and using that as a discussion back and forth for practicing for actually applying for a job there too. And I'm thinking with some of these things, and really one of the things I was walking away from it here, and I've heard this before, maybe all really breaking it down into steps, not dumping everything in there and telling it to have a finished product, but breaking it down in those steps in there and using it that back and forth, like Susan is helping her practice there and giving some critique back.
That's a good idea.
Very
That's
cool.
a good takeaway.
Right on.
Susan commented, if you need a confidence boost, well, AI definitely boosts your confidence. At least it adds some substance behind it, so you can they're not just a sick of, that's why you said it was good, or it does say nice things about when you did things bad, I've noticed too. So.
I like when it says, that's so you.
Yes.
Well, speaking of So You, Connie, this has always been a really So You conversation. Fascinating. Lots of nuggets for us to tear apart. Gang, don't forget, instructional designers in offices drinking coffee or hot beverages or even cold beverages of your choice is brought to you every time by the team here at Domino, empowering L&D teams to develop, manage, and deliver impactful learning content at scale. We're here every second Wednesday live. We're also available in all of those places where you might find recorded versions of this, both video and audio podcast versions. So if you've missed anything that we've talked about in the past, make sure you can always catch up on the back catalog, so to speak. And we're actually 3 living people in everyone. It's not an LLM generated podcast. We didn't feed them in a book. So
not that nice yet.
Yeah. And hey, we're always happy to tell you that you're doing well, everybody. You're doing great. Awesome. Connie, thanks so much for joining us here today. It's been a blast. It's time to dance on out, gang.